That's okay. It's all right.
We'll cut it out.
Well, no, it's okay.
Who is she talking to?
Ron Latz. Yep, still no Ron in trying to get in this meeting yet.
Where would he like it sent? I've got 2 emails to him.
Oh gosh, send him all 3, I think.
Yeah.
He just called Cheryl.
All right, we are live on Facebook. Welcome, community members. We are dealing with some technical difficulties of a few legislative candidates trying to join, so bear with us and we'll get going. Here is Senator Latz joining, and I'm going to share the screen.
All right, very good.
All right.
Awesome.
All right, here we go.
Take it away.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience. My name is Michelle Pasco. I'm the co-chair of the LAC, and I will be hosting this candidate forum on education. This is for Senate District 46, and we are going to do a little intro, and then we'll get started with our first of 3 questions that the candidates have all seen before. First of all, the LAC is a nonpartisan advocacy group comprised of school board members, parents, students, and community members organized to advocate for education funding and policies at the state and federal levels. So we are the Hopkins LAC, however, we include all education when we advocate. Okay. So our candidates are all here. Whoops. Sorry about that. Sorry, I'm not the most proficient at this.
There you go.
Why is it not moving? There we go. All right. So today we have, this is District 46, Mr. Ron Latz. Mr. Brian Bjornson has not yet joined us. We're hoping he'll be here soon. Mr. Ryan Winkler, Ms. Ann Taylor has not joined us yet. Ms. Cheryl Joachim, and Melissa Moore has declined to attend. So the guidelines for our questions are that the LAC does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. And the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates and not of the LAC or of Hopkins Public Schools. This is a forum to offer voters an opportunity to hear from the candidates that represent Hopkins School District communities and so that affect our families, and they will, of course, affect families across Minnesota. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves and a minute for a concluding statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and we'll keep a time, and we do have the right to kind of shut you down a little if you're going past the 2 minutes, but we'll try to avoid that. And the candidates are in all the names are in a randomizer on Google, and each question will be pressing that button and randomly choosing the order of answering questions. Okay, before I do this, let's just see if there's anyone else who's trying to join. No, there is not at this point. So, all right, I'll start the first question and then we will, whoops. Yeah, thank you. Then we'll get started with 2-minute answers. Currently, school boards.
Michelle, did you want us to give opening
Oh,
statements or no?
I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you, Cheryl. I'm just trying to barrel right through. Sorry about that. I appreciate the interruption. Okay, so that's why I was trying to not share my, okay, never mind. All right, we have Mr. Bjornson joining us. Okay, so at this point, yes, we are at introductions, 2-minute introductions for each candidate. Mr. Latz is first in this random selection.
So I just go ahead. All right, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm a Hopkins High School grad, came over from the Golden Valley School District, class of 1981 from Lindbergh at the time. And I serve in the state Senate now after having served on the city council in St. Louis Park and as a state representative as well. Over the course of my legislative career, I have served on the Education Committee mostly in the House, and I was on the Higher Education Committee in the House and in the Senate for a number of years. I'm a former chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and now I'm the minority lead on the committee as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this forum. Education has always been the number one priority in our communities that I've represented. When talking with constituents, their primary concern is making sure the children in the community are getting an excellent K-12 education to prepare them for whatever course they choose in life, whether it's going on to college or it's going on to technical schools or whether it's going directly into the workforce. As we know, kids tend to spend more time in the K-12 schools, certainly during the regular week, than they do at home. So the impact of the environment in our schools is very significant on the formation of our children's skills and talents and ability to work interpersonally with others as well. So it's an awfully high priority for a lot of reasons, and I welcome the opportunity to share our thoughts in more detail as we move forward with this forum. Thank you. Oh, I should also note before we go on, I've got a child's 13th birthday party tonight, and I might have to leave a little bit early, depending on how the timing of this goes, because we have guests coming over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bjornson, you would be next. 2-minute introductions. Did we lose him? I think we've lost him. Okay, well, we'll get him at the end if he's able to join us back again. So if we could get Ms. Taylor, please, to do introductions. Just
Sure.
an introduction, thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Ann Taylor here, running again. I ran in 2016, representing 46A. Would like to have your vote. Really, for the last 7 years, I've been involved in advocacy, specifically with regard to our children, the federal education system, including what began as Common Core social emotional learning, data collection, student surveys, which I pioneered a few years ago. Back in 2015, there was a law that was, or 2016, I helped get implemented 121-8065, which is a bill on student surveys, and that parents have the right to view those before they get distributed to students. I've been a big advocate of opting out of the standardized testing. Also concerned about some of the curriculum that's coming through our schools. Comprehensive sex ed is one of them, as it was passed in the House last year. And I've got a lot to say about distance learning. I think we all share a lot of concerns about distance learning, data collection, and protection for our children. Parent here, I lived in Golden Valley for the last 9 years. My husband, Tom, we share a 31-year-old stepson. I have a 20-year-old from my previous marriage from my late husband, and together Tom and I share an 8-year-old. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to pipe in here, Mr. Bjornson apologizes. He had audio problems and had to leave the meeting. So next up would be Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, my name is Cheryl Joachim. I'm the current state representative for 46B, which is Hopkins and St. Louis Park. I'm also the mother of 3 children in that went through the Hopkins schools and a wife of a Hopkins teacher. And I got my time started in politics as a member of the Hopkins LAC. So I really do appreciate you having this forum. As a Hopkins Education Policy Chair for the last 2 years, I've been fully engaged on education issues, and since March have been laser focused on how we can get the schools tools that they needed to pivot to distance learning at the drop of a hat, and then also to start planning through the summer and the fall, summer for what fall would look like. I also serve on the Education Finance Committee, the Transportation Finance and Policy Committee, and the Tax Committee. Before becoming a House member, I served 9 years on the Hopkins City Council and appreciate and value local control. One of the biggest projects I worked on there that I'm most proud of was the Southwest LRT. very happy that we got the full funding grant agreement and see that as a way for kids to connect to more opportunities down in the U of M campus and other college campuses around the Twin Cities. And that's one thing that you'll learn about me. That project took a very long time and a lot of persistence, and that's what I am about, hard work and persistence. I value community and developing relationships. I'm accessible and welcoming to constructive criticism about opportunities and challenges facing our communities. And we have more success, I believe, when we work together, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And Mr. Winkler.
Good afternoon, and thank you for hosting the forum once more to the LAC. I've enjoyed these conversations over the years and appreciate the opportunity to talk about education with the school district that is currently working to educate my 3 kids. I have a junior in high school, I have an 8th grader, and I have a 5th grader at Meadowbrook. My junior high student is at North Junior High. So I care very much about the success of the Hopkins schools, and I care very much about the success of public schools in general across Minnesota. As a product of public schools in Bemidji myself, I know that a statewide investment in quality education for all kids can be life-changing for so many. So I really deeply care about this issue. I think that there are many ways in which our school system is not addressing some of the biggest challenges we face. We first and foremost have deep racial disparities in outcomes, and the opportunity gap between kids of color and poor kids compared with their middle class and white counterparts is not acceptable, and it's not sustainable for Minnesota's economic future. On top of that, of course, COVID-19 and distance learning makes those challenges even greater and more difficult to overcome. So in the years ahead, I think Minnesota is going to have a deep reckoning with how we're providing public schools, public education to all students, and making sure that the kids who need us the most find that we are there for them. From early learning and family support, home visiting, quality pre-K experiences, and a robust system of schools to address the actual needs of students. All of those things are important and will take some significant investment, but also rethinking the way we provide education and making sure that we are meeting the needs of the whole child. So thank you very much again for the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
All right, we'll head right to the first question. And again, for those listening or watching at home, these first 3 questions have been, the candidates have all seen these before. Currently, school boards may not start the school year before Labor Day unless they are extenuating circumstances. Also, of all types of taxing authorities in Minnesota, cities, counties, watershed districts, mosquito control districts, etc., school districts are the only type of taxing authority required to conduct a referendum in order to renew or increase the property taxation rate. So do you support allowing locally elected school boards to set their own school calendar? Why or why not? And do you support allowing locally elected school boards to renew an existing operating referendum by a majority vote of the school board after a public hearing? Please tell us your reasons. We'll start with, well, Mr. Bjornson couldn't join us, so Ann Taylor would be first in this
Sure.
round.
Thank you. This was an interesting question to me because way back in 2008, I was involved with AmeriCorps Vista through the Minnesota Literacy Council, where I served in Wayzata. And one of the events that we had gone to, we actually went down to the state capitol, and I believe it was the first time I ever heard or experienced for the first time a live hearing. And ironically, it was about this and setting their own calendar. And the same argument was, do we start this or begin this before or after Labor Day? That was the argument. But again, the false start times. And there was a lot of pushback with it. There was pushing, leaning forward, but there was a lot of pushback for it because of the state fair, 4-H, which of course we did not see this year at all because of COVID. But really the need was to support those in the recreation cabin industry, families that would like to vacation, but really for business purposes. So the pushback was really monetary. And this brought a lot of issues, right? So here we are 12 years later. seeing this in the Minneapolis schools. So some of the charter schools have had early start times, say in July, probably just a few years ago. I am concerned how this would affect everyone, particularly with COVID and distance learning and hybrid models that have all been thrust at us and still continues. It is disruptive. I was just door knocking today and heard it again from parents. They're really concerned about this. I'm concerned about the current outlook following COVID for, economically. How would, if we are allowing the state to decide, how is that going to funnel in, say, from the federal or state funding? Are they going to be making the mandates? Who is going to be in charge of making that mandate? Because I still think we need to be involved in local control and letting the school boards decide. But there's so many things that could, I think, go wrong if we start pushing in that direction. I don't know that every school could start in July. Do we really want to do that? Do we want to keep our kids in? Because I'm concerned about where that gravity is going to go for everyone. So, and I think that also comes to mind is busing and transportation, staggering start times all over. I mean, we see that a little bit with vacationing districts doing different things, but this is a big mess we've got on our hands with COVID.
Okay, thanks. I'm letting you go a little bit longer if necessary.
Okay.
It's kind of a two-piece question, so that
Sure.
I go a little past. So
I apologize.
no, that's okay. I'll do the same for the others. So that's
Okay.
I should probably maybe.
Well, that's right. There was an A and a B question. I apologize. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
okay,
noticing
so
that
now it's,
So I'll give a quick short answer for that one. Really, I think public hearings are awesome. I've been a part of them. I think they're great. I think the citizens do have the right to make their voice, their observations, opinions, and wishes, because we pay for that. Our property taxes pay, and I think it's essential to restore that local decision making.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Latz is next. Can you unmute?
There we go.
There you go.
Now you can't complain if you don't like everything that I say, of course. On the question of early start, I'm kind of mixed feeling on this one because, sometimes our school districts have taken advantage of the opportunity to get a little bit earlier start. I haven't heard of anyone talking about starting in July, but sometimes maybe a week before Labor Day. I do believe we probably need more in-school days in general than we've been able to do. On the other hand, I respect the desire of families to have not just not the businesses to stay afloat at the end of the summer, but also the families to get their last opportunities in at their cabins and in greater Minnesota as we head into the school year. So I'm open to the question. Sometimes Labor Day is late in the season too, and we need to be cognizant of the calendar every year. With regard to the accountability of school district financing, I was a local elected official. I was accountable for all the decisions that I made on the city council every time I was up for re-election. And we made the decisions on what levies to raise, what funds to raise without going to referendum. I think it's hypocritical to apply a different standard to school districts. They're all taxpayer dollars, and the school boards are elected just like every other local official is. And even as the intro noted, local decision makers that aren't elected but are appointed, like the mosquito control district, have more authority to raise money. So I'd support eliminating the referendum requirements, and then if people don't like it, they can vote out the officials that passed that.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl Joachim is next.
Thank you. Yes, I would have to piggyback on what Senator Latz said. My election certificate isn't any more important than a school board member's election certificate. And having served on a city council, we had taxing authority. So I did co-author a bill to allow that flexibility for operating levies. And then as for the start before Labor Day, I actually carried that bill, got it out of our committee, but it was stripped out on the House floor. It's something I think we need to revisit next year, especially as we're seeing districts right now doing a very good job at dealing with the flexibility of start times and allowing our locals to make more of those decisions. So support both.
Thank you. Okay, let me, before I read the next question, I'll hit the randomizer. Make sure we have,
You want to get me on the record on this too?
oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Winkler.
It's okay.
I'm like thinking 2 steps ahead and I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, I'm
Yeah.
quite all right. So, yeah, I think that I come out a little bit differently on the 2 questions. So on the first one, the post-Labor Day start, what my position has been basically that if school districts can demonstrate that the same number of days in school are better spent in late August than they are in early June, then changing the law would make sense. But I don't really frankly understand why we would change a Minnesota tradition of the state fair and Labor Day weekend, whether it's at the cabin or camping or on vacation somewhere else, or just a last weekend before things turn hectic in the fall. I don't know why we would change away from a post-Labor Day start absent some indication that would actually change to different or better outcomes for academics for kids. On the question of the levies, I do think that the school district should be able to set its own levy without going to a referendum, but it does really raise the broader question of whether the state is adequately supporting all school districts and all kids across Minnesota through state aid. And in fact, we're left with a situation because we have not kept up with inflation with state aid, where some school districts are able to fund themselves through local property tax wealth and others are not. And in the places where it is most difficult to fund high quality education with the local property tax base, that's when it's hardest to pass these referenda. So we are left with a less equal system of public education across the state. And the uniformity is part of what the Constitution mandates. So I'm most interested in outcomes, less interested in particular modes of decision-making, but I do think the referendum doesn't make sense. And I'm open to the Labor Day change, but I would want something more than just a desire to make that decision locally as a justification for it.
Thank you. And just a heads up, you're up first, Mr. Winkler, for the next question.
I'll stay unmuted.
Okay. Question number 2. Let me put it up so everyone can see it. Okay. A lot of clicking to happen here. Okay, distance learning and the changes made to educational delivery during a pandemic have been particularly hard for families with special needs and those students needing extra support. What are your plans for ensuring that schools are able to meet those needs?
We are going to have a very, I think, deep conversation at the legislature in the next session starting in January on how we address the pandemic, because we have the 2-year budget that we have to set. And with that budget goes not only decisions about dollars into the current formula, but how we might need to change formula, how we may need to add additional funding, how we address a $4.7 billion budget shortfall while still meeting these needs. So I don't necessarily have all the answers on how best to support kids who have special needs or need resources from the schools the most, but I know that we have to have an in-depth conversation with school districts, with parents, with kids, with everybody concerned about education in Minnesota to see that we are doing our best to address the very challenges that Ms. Taylor was talking about. COVID has thrown an entire wrench into our education system, and right now it doesn't feel like there are any good answers. And so to me, what we have to do is, as we're setting our 2-year budget going forward, we have to make sure that we are doing our very best to come out of COVID in the best way possible and start to address the deep opportunity gaps that are not only affecting our schools on a regular basis, but in particular now with COVID. So we have our work cut out for us, and I don't think anybody has all the answers yet on what needs to happen.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl Joachim would be next.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. First of all, I want to thank our administrators and our teachers and all our support staff for all the work they're doing to put into our distance learning models and all 3 models of education they're having to pivot to this year. COVID has really taken a toll on everyone. It has shown a harsh light on the disparities in all of our institutions, from healthcare to housing to the opportunity gap in our schools. And as a former paraprofessional in special education, I personally know the needs of some of those our kiddos and understand the frustration that the parents are having to meet those needs. And during the pandemic, I was happy to see Hopkins schools focus on trying to get our kiddos with special needs into classrooms as fast as possible to get that one-on-one work in through a hybrid model. But we just have to also make sure that all the safety protocols are being followed. And our education delivery model wasn't working for everyone before COVID, and it's not working for everyone right now. The good news is that maybe this is an opportunity to reimagine that. I've been talking to the folks that have put together the AMSD Reimagine report, and very hopeful on different and creative ways we can change the way we deliver education so that we're meeting more kids' needs. Because like I said, it did not work for everybody before COVID, and it's sure not working for everybody right now. But I think that's something, if we all get together, we can figure this out.
Thank you. Mr. Latz.
Thank you. I guess I will endorse what Representative Winkler and Representative Joachim had to say and add to it in the context that our educators have done an extraordinary amount of preparation to transition folks into schools this fall. And the complexity of it has been enormous and very impressive the way the adjustments have been made. The challenge comes, I think, in terms of making sure we have sufficient resources at the local level to address these needs. There are certain categories of kids, the younger kids especially, and those with special needs, where in-person, one-on-one contact is even more important for a successful education. And the fact is, the state is going to be facing an enormous budget shortfall. So how we're going to balance all of that, I think, remains to be seen. I'm afraid that the local school districts are probably going to be more on their own in terms of finding the resources than we would like them to be. But we also have a role that we can play at the State Department of Education in collecting information on how different school districts are accomplishing these changes and making sure other school districts have the tools and knowledge to be able to adjust their own efforts to make use of what will emerge, I think, as best practices. And I agree with Cheryl that some of these practices may turn out to be long-term, more effective mechanisms for delivering education to families and kids with special needs.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Okay, so this one I'm pretty passionate about. I come from a family of 3 adopted siblings, 2 who are African-American and 1 who was diagnosed at a young age with autism. So I know what that brings. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, my brother. He took his life in 2018. So I understand ultimately how difficult this has been, and under COVID, from speaking with other families. I even spoke to some folks out in, there's a special ed school for those with autism in Minnetonka. They were actually going to relocate here, not far from where I live, to Golden Valley. And due to COVID, that got disrupted. It's been extremely disruptive again and again. We've heard this time and time again. But what I want to say here is, I do agree with Ryan that we do need to, there needs to be a deeper conversation how this is going to be done. It's deeply problematic. It's my understanding that locally we pay 35%, right? And then the state is paying about 65%, and then the feds dump in about 5%. How are we going to, the biggest question is, how are we going to fund the brick and mortar schools when we've got kids in and out all over right now? And how are we going to fund this at the state level? How is this going to solve our problem? I'm concerned that at some point that this may be pushed or a burden on our local tax districts. And what about those students who are non-resident students? How are we going to solve that one? So I have a deep concern with that and cross subsidy and what's going on with that.
Thank you. All right. I think I got everyone that time. So we'll move on to the next question. Let me get it on the screen. So everyone can see it. Okay. A proposed constitutional amendment, a proposed Minnesota constitutional amendment was brought forth last spring regarding the state's obligation toward public schools. It is designated to replace Article 13, Section 1, a part of Minnesota's state constitution since 1857. This proposed amendment will likely resurface post-COVID-19. What is your opinion of its proposed changes to the current language, which does not include any provisions by taxation for funding Minnesota's public schools? And just for those viewing, the amendment as it stands now has been distributed. All the candidates have seen it, as well as the proposed amendment language. So we do have links there, but they have all read it. Okay, and who is up next? Got to do the randomizer. Cheryl Joachim, please, first.
Thank you for this question. I was approached by Justice Page and President Kashkari back in November and was very excited to hear that they might have some ideas for closing the opportunity gap. I was a little disappointed with seeing the language of the amendment. I was worried, I'm still worried, that it takes away the language that requires us to fund our public schools. It also, basically the way it is written, adds standardized testing into our Constitution. It also gives more authority to the executive branch and the judicial branch to do what we would consider legislating. So there's a few questions I have, but I'm very happy that we have so many people paying attention to the quality of our schools and our opportunity gap that we have. I think we could come together and find some better language to put this forward, but it really is a long-term approach. We need short-term approaches right now for our kids. We need to focus on things like full service community schools, mental health support, social emotional learning, and figuring out how to do multi-tiered systems of support and many other things that we could do right now to improve non-exclusionary discipline, the environment our kids are in right now, and looking at the constitutional amendment, having that very big conversation throughout the state and with a lot of heads coming together to figure out the best way to approach this in the long run. But right now we need to really concentrate on the short run and getting our schools and our students what they need to succeed.
Thank you. Mr. Latz.
So this proposed amendment has taken some of the best and brightest minds in the state and focused their attention on educational uniformity and closing the achievement gap. And that can't be anything but good to be focusing on these issues. So I'm glad for the conversation it has generated. I share some of the concerns that Representative Joachim has outlined regarding the absence of a mandatory funding mechanism in there. And I'm also quite concerned that the impact here, without any formal uniformity language in there, could open the door to vouchers, which would have an effect of defunding public education in favor of private education, including private religious education, which I have a great deal of difficulty with. I don't think we solve the problem with funding in public schools by directing more public dollars toward private education. So that said, I'm also concerned about the courts and how deeply involved they could get in fashioning an education system in response to a lawsuit flowing from a new constitutional provision. So I would much prefer to leave our existing constitution the way it is at this time and devote all this attention and energy toward modifying the existing system to target our resources on the achievement gap issues themselves throughout the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Sure. I agree with Ron on quite a few points. Actually, we seem to agree on some things here. I do like the idea of vouchers, and I understand that concern. But my concern with vouchers is this: is as much as I would like to see that, and I'm getting off topic here just for a moment, so bear with me. As much as I would like to see that, the concern is then what kinds of mandated curriculum and whatnot goes into that for a private school. They should, every time you take a federal penny or a state aid in your private education, that's exactly what you're going to get in your private school. That aside, I was pretty watching very closely. I remember the Minneapolis Federal Reserve Bank president and former Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Alan Page proposed those amendments on the Senate floor. And as we all know, it created quite a bit of heat and controversy. I don't agree with the way that it was proposed. The amendment states that the Constitution is to, enshrine a child's right to quality public education, but define quality education, especially with all of the mandates that we're seeing with curriculum now. How could this affect homeschoolers? I think it's a very serious undertaking and is futile ground the way it's written right now for future lawsuits. Again, I would question what the framework is for quality education. And frankly, this change was taken directly out of the UN language, making this a universal change. And to me, that's a lot of holes.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler.
I think it's important to emphasize the fact that this constitutional amendment is born out of extreme frustration with the status quo in education in Minnesota. The people who I know who support it and who kind of put in some of the thinking behind the concept of it are really infused with the conviction that our system of public education is failing students of color. It is failing kids who don't come from strong socioeconomic backgrounds, and it is not performing its job under the Constitution we have now, which is a uniform system of public education. So from their perspective, I think the question would be, what do we have to lose? What would be so bad about disrupting the status quo that we have? Because what we're doing now is continuing to fail our kids from their perspective. And I think that that's correct. I think that we need some form or mechanism of disrupting the status quo in public education in Minnesota, because we have looked and admired this problem for so long. We have seen these gaps emerge. We have seen little progress in making a difference. Yes, we have not funded our public schools the way that we used to, and that has had serious consequences. But even though I strongly support reversing that trend and investing more in schools who are dealing with challenges that a past generation of school systems didn't face, socioeconomic, social, emotional, and other kinds of divisions in the schools need to be addressed with dollars, but they also have to be matched with some new thinking. So I don't support the amendment as written, but I do support an effort to find a way to disrupt the way we are currently thinking about education in Minnesota and making sure that we are serving all of our kids. Because if we cannot address that, if we can't make that change in Minnesota, we are going to be even further divided in a way that is going to be detrimental for the next generation of our whole state.
Thank you. All right, so now we've exhausted the 3 questions we sent you all in advance. So we'll take some community questions from the audience. And I'll do the randomizer first, so I don't lose track of that. Come on. Did I do it? Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Okay. The first question is, some of you touched on this tiny bit, so we want to kind of broaden this maybe. Do you support vouchers, expanded tax credits, or other taxpayer subsidies for non-public schools? Why or why not? And the first answer would be from Ms. Joaquin.
Sorry, caught me off guard. I was writing down the question. Short answer is no, I do not. One of the reasons is because no matter what we do for tax credit and vouchers, it's not going to come close to paying for a private school. So we will still have folks that won't be able to access. Other thing is we have a lot of school choice here in Minnesota already. We have open enrollment, we have charter schools, What we really need to be doing is going back to the constitutional amendment we currently have on the books, is making sure that our public schools are the best that they can be. And we need more resources as it is now, let alone diverting public dollars into private schools.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler.
I don't support vouchers or expanding tax credits for moving public dollars into private institutions to educate only a few kids. I think that is a mistaken approach to fixing our challenges in public education, and I have consistently opposed those. We have a lot of school choice, as Cheryl mentioned, and it depends on where you live, of course. If you are in a rural area, having a voucher won't help you if your local school system doesn't have strong public support through state aid, for example. There aren't other schools to go to. And there is, self-selecting more people into separate systems, I don't think will actually help us improve anything. I think we need to fund the school system, the public schools, and we need to have higher expectations for the needs that they're meeting of all students, especially based on their social emotional needs, disability, and the challenges they face as English language learners or kids coming from impoverished backgrounds, and we have many more of those. So we have a lot of work to do in our public schools, and the first step should not be to dismantle that system through vouchers.
Thank you. Mr. Latz.
I strongly oppose the use of vouchers. I respect people who wish to send their kids to private schools, but that's not part of our public community responsibility to make sure they are funded. That's an individual private choice. The public has an obligation, not only constitutional, which is a legal obligation, but I think a moral obligation, and one which is most important for our civic health, to make sure that every kid has an opportunity through public schools to get a good quality education. And that's where our resources should go. I also share Ms. Taylor's expressed concern about the strings that would go along with public dollars directed into private schools. If we are going to have accountability of public dollars wherever they go, we would have to have some strings attached. And when you get money going into private religious schools, then you've got public accountability in interfering with, frankly, probably religious education. And I don't think it's appropriate from a constitutional standpoint or from a moral standpoint for us to be taking any role in the religious education that way. So, and most fundamentally, vouchers would in effect redirect resources that we need in our public system into the private system, and that would undermine, not complement, our public duties to provide a good public education.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
So, yeah, thanks for chiming in on that, Ron. I appreciate that. And I do agree. It's a slippery slope. Personally, I think vouchers allow parents it allows their parents to choose their child's education. School vouchers can improve education in general, by making the schools compete with the private schools for free market. But as we just touched on before, when the private schools, particularly religious schools, and I've seen this happen, when they start taking those fed ed dollars, and then you got accountability and then curriculum that just doesn't jive with that. You're running into a lot of issues with that. School vouchers, I think, could allow the school districts to overcome racial segregation. School vouchers could offer students in failing schools better access to better education. I know that the teachers' unions have denounced the decision, arguing that tax dollars should not be used to fund private religious education. Honestly, it's a real slippery slope. You got to take the curriculum out of it. Hard to do.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more question. Here we go. Schools have changed how they deliver education, but not how they assess students. What are your thoughts on changing how we measure student success? And Ms. Taylor, you are first.
Well, measuring student success, I don't believe comes from a standardized test. We are testing way too much. with the online learning, which to some they might think is an advantage, but let's face it, it's the drill and grill method, over and over and over again. And online learning, are they truly retaining? You can't rely on algorithms and analogs to make a decision on how a child is learning. Those teachers need to be back in the schools with the kids, teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. We need to get back to those original things. That is not happening. To me, it's agendaized. I mean, the social emotional thing, okay, I can see where that could be helpful, but does it really belong distinctly in the classroom and distinctly with answering questions online? Standardized testing anymore is not about a factual thing. It's more about meeting an agenda. And then it's the increase of that. I mean, how many times a year are kids being tested? How much before COVID anyway? Standardized testing, we've been hearing about that, that's being pulled away, but now we're going to re-implement it again. It's thoroughly disruptive. It doesn't measure a child's strength, no matter what background they come from. What's really needed is, again, get back to the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and stop collecting data and information on our children without parental consent. These kids are minors. You know, whenever a test came through for my child that I was constantly having to opt out of, you know, nobody was asking, you know, in advance, what do you think of this? You know, we're taking your child's information and we're going to build a bank on it. We're going to build a bank of information, which unfortunately, you know, my opponent with HF1, that's what this is all about. I'll stop there. I
Okay.
could go on.
Mr. Winkler is next.
I share some of Ms. Taylor's views on testing. I do think that we fell into a trap of thinking that standardized tests were going to lead to data that showed which schools were successful, which ones were failing, which teachers were good, which teachers were not good. And standardized testing doesn't really show much of anything like that. I think that the computer adaptive testing, MAP testing, which are used to measure student growth over the course of a year, and it provides an actual tool for a teacher to understand where each student is in their learning journey. I think that can be highly valuable, and I think having those results available for evaluating teachers, schools, what kinds of curriculum, et cetera, are successful, I think that can be of considerable value. But the standard test that we do across Minnesota today, I don't think shows us very much. And I don't know that it has led to a significant or improvement in policy. HF1 is the reference there is to early childhood education and an investment in early learning, which I do strongly support. And I do think that we need to collect data on student achievement in some form or another to have a sense of the direction our school system is going in. But I think the emphasis on standardized testing as a method of improving education was wrong-headed to begin with. And I think undermines the true value in education, or the real value add, which is a teacher developing a relationship with the student and having the time and resources to genuinely understand that student and help them grow throughout the course of a year. I don't think standardized tests reach that very well. And we need to, instead of taking that approach, we should focus on respecting teachers as professionals and encouraging them to have the time and give them the time to have meaningful relationships with their students.
Thank you. Mr. Latz.
So I think that there are two main portions of education as I view them as important. One is basic knowledge, and that's the reading and the writing and the arithmetic. And I don't know how you measure that, certainly not from a comparative standpoint, without having some form of standardized tests that you can apply across the board. I support gathering data, using that for information, and applying scientific method to evaluating the effectiveness of what's being used. And I think it's appropriate to use certain baselines that are consistent across the state to get some idea of how well the students are learning. What it doesn't do as good a job of measuring is what I think is the other most important thing that we teach our kids, which is the ability to think critically and to problem solve. And that, I think, requires more interaction with the teachers. I think it requires more of the computer adaptive testing that's going on, because you can individualize the testing to the student that way, both with the live teacher and with the computer algorithms that are in use. So I don't think I'd throw everything out here. I think there's a valuable role to be played. And I know that we have used the results from standardized testing to help evaluate where our child is in their learning journey and whether they need to shore up certain areas or focus on other areas to keep up and to get ahead where we want them to be. I think there's a value to all of it, but we shouldn't overemphasize it. It's not the be and all and end all. It's not the total solution. We need the blended and balanced approach here. And I'm going to take just a moment to say thank you. I do have to jump off because I've got a child's birthday to finish preparing for here. Outdoors, by the way. Hopefully the rain will hold off. But thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'll waive any further closing statement, and good luck to everyone on the call here.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And Ms. Joachim is the last speaker on this question.
Thank you. So summative and formative assessments are a part of the pedagogy of teaching. It's a way we figure out where our kids are at, what they need to work on, and how they can move forward. So having testing there is important within the class. And I agree with Representative Winkler around the MAP testing. It's a great tool to have an immediate result for teachers to figure out what students need to get more extra help on. What we have done too is trying to figure out a way with a formative assessment to figure out how our schools are doing in teaching our students and teaching to our standards to make sure that we're holding them accountable for the tax dollars that we're paying. What we need to figure out is how to make it understood and make it an easier test, a shorter test to get to that same result, so parents don't feel like they have to opt out because their kids have been over-tested. The only test we ask at the state level, frankly, is the MCAs. And that is to make sure that we are being accountable for our tax dollars. All the rest of the testing are chosen by the districts themselves. So we need to start working together and figuring out how we can do that to minimize the amount of testing our kids have to do. And I'm heartened by the fact that the folks that put together the MAP testing are matching them up to our standards and trying to figure out a way we could take kind of those cumulative MAP tests to get to that same end goal that our MCAs are too. So it's stuff that we've been working on as well, because we do want to be sensitive to how parents are feeling about their kids being over-tested, but we also have to be accountable for our tax dollars and also make sure that our kids are getting the tools that they need to succeed.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the question and answer part. We just have 1 minute for each candidate to have their closing remarks, and that would conclude our evening here. So actually, Ms. Joachim, you are first, and then Mr. Winkler and Mr. Latz had to leave, and so then Ms. Taylor would be last. So you can go ahead, Cheryl, when you're ready.
Thank you once again for hosting the forum. I'm State Representative Joachim, and it's important to listen to our community members and understand what they value. And in talking to the folks in Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and around our state, I've heard that they want an economy that works for everyone, not just a few. At the top, they want to be successful, but they also want their neighbors and their friends to be successful as well. They want a quality, well-funded education system from early childhood through high school and well beyond to make sure our kids can participate in the economy. They value a robust transportation system and a clean environment that they can leave for the next generation. They also want a justice system that is fair and equal, and communities where everyone feels safe and respected. I believe that we all do better when we come together to work for that vision instead of the politics of fear and division that we're seeing right now. So thank you for watching this forum and being engaged, and have a great day.
Thank you. Mr. Winkler.
I also want to thank the Hopkins LAC for not only this forum today, but for continuing advocacy at the state capitol on behalf of the students in the Hopkins school system. My kids are direct beneficiaries of long advocacy by parents and community members at the LAC, and we see a well-supported public school system in our district, supported by parents and supported by community members, supported by tax dollars, because we believe in the mission, and the LAC is part of that. I am absolutely committed to public education and believe that we need to, at the state level, make sure that we are adequately funding the school system so that every kid, no matter where they live, what they look like, or what their background is, has an opportunity to learn and be successful. Minnesota has a long way to go to provide equal opportunity to all kids in education. And that is one of the biggest challenges our state faces over the next generation. The next legislative session is an opportunity to dive deep and see what we can do. And I ask for your support in this election to return to St. Paul and continue working on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. And I want to thank again the LAC for hosting this and for giving me an opportunity to speak out a little bit on this. I am for a quality education, as I think all of us agree. Once again, I did help pass a law protecting student data. I am a strong advocate for the safety of children, particularly online. I value the importance of teachers. They have a very important job in mentoring our children, their future lives. But we do need to get back to the basics, and those basics are reading, writing, and arithmetic. There is no reason any child at this day and age, every child has the ability to learn. There's just too much out there for them. I am concerned about special needs children, and I absolutely will promote and continue to promote the rights of parents and support the safety measures in our schools. I've done this for a while here, and I would absolutely appreciate your vote and your support in utilizing some of my ideas as a parent, from a parent perspective, and having influence in private school, public school, and now homeschooling. So I've got quite a bit of parent perspective on that. Thank you, and I hope to have your vote.
Thank you. Okay, thank all of you for joining us. And I know we had little tech issues at the beginning for people joining us, and some that couldn't join us, but I really appreciate your time, and the community appreciates hearing from you. And we look forward to seeing you all at the ballot box. Thank you from the LAC. Have a good night.